So chapter 7 picks up where chapter 6 left off. In that chapter 6, we did cellular respiration. Photosynthesis is the reverse of that. And so we're going to talk lots about eukaryotic cells, but this time mostly about plant cells. So photosynthesis is how organisms can use light to make food. We're talking about carbohydrates or sugars when we're talking about food. So if we think about it, all the food that we ate, that energy originally came from the sun. And so, we have photosynthesis setting us up for respiration. This picture over here on the side echoes some of the things that we talked about right from the beginning of the course, where it really shows this cycling of chemical nutrients. And it also shows the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And so we had talked about words like producers and consumers from the beginning. We're consumers down here. We take the chemical energy that producers put into the chemical energy and metabolize it. So this is chapter 6, right? This is cellular respiration. That's what the consumers are doing, making a little heat and ATP. And then the producers, such as plants, this is chapter 7. So that is that endergonic reaction, that process of photosynthesis. Down here we have the chemical equation of photosynthesis, and like we did with respiration, these are the key players. These are the key things that we want to account for as we understand the biochemical process of photosynthesis. So you can see that the light energy is going in, that's what makes it an endergonic reaction, and we have really simple reactants going in. We have carbon dioxide and water going in. We have glucose or other sugars coming out and oxygen coming out. And so these are the key ones. Those sixes are in front just to balance the chemical equation. So if you're not a chemistry person, that's cool if you don't know where those ones would have come from. The other thing, if you're not comfortable with the chemical formula for these things, you can remember it in the words. And so there's lots of levels. This is another heavy biochemical process in cell biology. Okay, so this stuff is probably what you would have known about photosynthesis already. We've done a lot of the legwork in setting photosynthesis up by doing having a thorough understanding, hopefully, of respiration. And so photosynthesis makes the energy and building blocks for us, for the whole ecosystem with that energy or nutrient cycling and energy cycling. It's going to take light energy and transform it into a potential energy, which is chemical energy or stored energy in the bonds of sugar. It uses carbon dioxide and water going in. We then can have respiration after this. So it's kind of the setup. It also produces the oxygen that plants and other aerobic organisms like us need for cellular respiration. And so you can see even on this slide, we've got photosynthesis and respiration linked. And so that's what that image was trying to communicate in a picture form. So we have talked about consumers and producers before. So producers are the ones that can photosynthesize. If something makes its own sugar without using other organic molecules, so carbon-based molecules like glucose or fats or sugars, anything really in our macromolecules conversation. So producers, the other word for them would be autotrophs. And so those two words are interchangeable. Specifically, there's branches of autotrophs that use light, and so we call them photoautotrophs. As we get into the later chapters, we'll see that there are other kinds of autotrophs, but mostly what we're talking about here is photoautotrophs to get started. So typically we think of them as plants, but there are other organisms that are photoautotrophs. We've got some pictures on the next slide to broaden our understanding of how many things photosynthesize. It's surprising. So for most of our conversation, we're going to focus on plants because that's more practically what you can apply this to in your life. But there are other things, algae, protists, single-cell organisms, prokaryotes as opposed to eukaryotes. So there are some bacteria that can photosynthesize. On the other side of producers, we had consumers. And so that's a word that we've talked about before. We're going to talk about consumers, or us, as heterotrophs. So it could be animals, um, sorry, examples, animals, I circled the wrong word, animals. So animals are heterotrophs. There are other things that are heterotrophs. So again, you think about the common one because that's what you can relate to. But if we think of all the things that are decomposing, we could think of mushrooms, lots of other sort of things that exist in your compost pile. Those are other examples of heterotrophs. So like I say, we can kind of focus on the main ones, but just, broadening your understanding, there are other things that work in these ways. Here are those examples. So, this is probably what you think of, forest plants, perhaps agriculture and a wheat field. Water produces a lot of photosynthesizing organisms. And so kelp is a good example. We could have kelp forests. And so water-based organisms that photosynthesize are an important contributor globally to all the organisms photosynthesizing. Other bacteria, so cyanobacteria, remember I said there were some prokaryotes that photosynthesize, so there's an image of that. And then also into the world of the teeny tiny, eventually we will get to things in this course that we can see, but there is a huge contribution by the teeny tiny. So again, aquatic organisms, so phytoplankton, we have a cycle in here where phytoplankton is the food for zooplankton. So this would be akin to plant, it's not really plants, and these would be akin to animals. Or I could say these are photoautotrophs and these are heterotrophs. And again, it's this idea of food chains and cycling of molecules. Okay, so if we were to really focus in on eukaryotic photosynthesis, even though there are others, we're going to really think about plants for the most part. And the key thing about eukaryotes is that they have all of the key organelles that we would have talked about back in chapter 4. So in eukaryotic cells, chloroplasts are those important organelles. So chloroplasts are organelles made of photosynthetic pigments, enzymes, and other molecules grouped together in membranes. We talked about chloroplasts back when we talked about the endosymbiotic hypothesis, in that they are kind of like early prokaryotic cells. And so we talked about them and mitochondria as contributing to that theory that explained the evolution of eukaryotic cells. So chloroplasts are a big deal. They are also interesting in that they have a double phospholipid bilayer, much like the mitochondria did. We'll come back to some diagrams of chloroplasts and their different parts. The pigment, one of the key pigments, is chlorophyll. And so we can have different kinds of chlorophyll, and not all chlorophyll or not all pigments are green in plants, but that's the one that we typically think of. So the chlorophyll is in the chloroplasts. Chlorophyll is key. That pigment is a big part of how we take solar energy and convert it to chemical energy. And there are others. So it's not just chlorophyll, but other names here. And we've got a little bit coming up because of, I'm making this video in the fall, and it's pretty evident that there are different colors in leaves at different times. So usually it's the chlorophyll that masks the other colors, but the fall's pretty awesome because you get to see some of those other pigments that are hiding behind the chlorophyll during most of the year. Okay, so plant structure. If we're going to understand chloroplasts, we need to kind of look at the components of chloroplasts. So if we were to take a look at a leaf and the cross section of a leaf, in the middle we have cells that are called the mesophyll. So the mesophyll region of a leaf, these cells would have a lot of chloroplasts in them. And so these are the cells in the center of green tissue in the interior of a leaf. If we were also to talk about leaves, leaves have stomata. Stomata, that's the plural, that's many, are little pores, or I talk about them as tiny holes. Usually they're in the bottom of a leaf. In cacti, they're actually in the stem. But the key thing about these holes or these pores is that that's how carbon dioxide can come in and oxygen can come out. If we have a lot of photosynthesis going on, then we need a lot of carbon dioxide. We're going to produce a lot of oxygen. But if those holes, if those pores, if those stomata are open, then it could also lose a lot of water. And so, there's this balance. And so we want to make sure that we can manage this, and those holes are key when we talk about it. We also have in leaf structure, we have the veins to deliver the water. And so always in these, we want to make sure that we're covering all the key characters. So the key characters would be the carbon dioxide and oxygen going in, and the water, and the oxygen coming out and the water going in. All right, so pictures are great. This shows the mesophyll of a leaf. So those would be the cells in the center. You can see the cells with their little green chloroplasts here. And then in those chloroplasts would be the chlorophyll. We can also see the stomata, or a singular stoma here. So plural would be stomata. Multiples. It's a longer word for the more things. And that's where the gases are coming in and out, and could also potentially lose water. So if you do have an aquarium, if you've ever seen it, on Earth, or on land, sorry, you don't get this chance to see the gases coming out of those stomata, but in an aquatic plant, you can actually see those bubbles being formed. So it might be an interesting application that you have in your home or your friend's home or something. So chloroplasts have another component. Are you kidding me? Some of these words are so close. So we have chloroplast, chlorophyll, we have stoma, and now we have stroma. So stroma is the fluid right here. That would be, well, I didn't mean to point to that green thing. It's the liquid in between. It's kind of that brownish part here. So I'll get my arrow to the right point. There. That is the stoma. Stroma, sorry. Stroma is the fluid outside of these thylakoids. And so thylakoids are concentrated in stacks, and a single stack is a granum, or a plural is a grana. Oh my goodness, there are so many words here. Don't worry, there's a vocab list coming up, and hopefully you did some of that pre-reading to get some of these straight. So here we have again that idea of the stroma in our chloroplasts. And then there are those two membranes here. There's an outer membrane and an inner membrane. Each one of those membranes is a phospholipid bilayer. So the last one here that we were talking about, an individual sac is a thylakoid, and a stack of them is a granum. Plural would be a grana. Okay, let's get some words straight. I think it's really key that you put these in your own words. I'll scribble some stuff down. Now, these aren't glossary definitions, and you could certainly copy definitions from the glossary. They're going to be better. But for me, it's really about getting these straight. So this slide is here to kind of keep things straight. In class, we always kind of talk, and people can contribute their words, and sometimes their words are better than mine. These are pretty personal. So photoautotrophs, those would be producers. So that's the autotrophs part that photosynthesize. Okay, photosynthesis, what is it? It's a chemical reaction. You could write out the whole chemical reaction, or you might think of it as turns light energy into chemical energy. If you wanted to say sugars instead of chemical energy, that would be fine too. So make sure you put these in a level of vocabulary that you're comfortable with. Again, these aren't glossary definitions. This is for you to get them straight. So chloroplast, this would be an organelle that photosynthesizes. Chlorophyll is the pigment. You can see this fill ending. This is the pigment in plants. These are cells. In the middle layer, oops, I didn't say layer, of a leaf. And so those were the ones that had a whole lot of chloroplasts in them. Stomata and stoma, these two are linked. So this is plural and this is singular. And those were the tiny holes. They were the holes for gases to go in and out, and that they have to make sure they can manage not losing too much water. So stroma is the fluid filled space in a chloroplast. And it was outside of the thylakoids. So thylakoids were the sacs and grana were the stacks. So this is plural. Singular is a granum. So we could honestly add another word here. Granum is the singular of those stacks of sacs. If you want, you could draw little pictures here too, if that helps keeps things straight for you. All right, so we're almost into or done the intro on all this, and then we'll get into the two processes that are photosynthesis. So the light that drives photosynthesis is radiation. It's electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic energy from the sun. Now, we think of light as visible light, but you can see here there's a huge continuum of electromagnetic energy that's emitted from the sun. And so these are possible energy that can be converted. Now, we're going to focus on here, and honestly, we focus on the visible light or the green light. But as we take a look a little bit more about these pigments, we're going to see that leaves are everything but green. What you see when you see color is the wavelengths that are reflected. You don't see the energies that are absorbed. So if we take a look at this, pigments are molecules that absorb light. And so if we were to talk about chlorophyll, typically the green color, it absorbs all the other colors and reflects the green. Other chlorophylls are different in hue, so they can reflect slightly different colors. And then these beautiful colors that we see in the fall, the yellow and the orange, are often hiding. Other times of the year, and when I made this PowerPoint, it was springtime, and I have a whole lot of succulents in my garden, and the same succulents can turn either this reddish hue or a bright, bright green, depending on how much sun they're getting. And so there is this element of, colors changing in the fall or other times of the year, photoprotection, when those pigments change in response to stress or maybe too much sun. And so the key thing here that we're talking about is these plant pigments absorb and reflect different colors. And that's why we see the colors of plants. So this one's the image just showing that in a picture format. Yeah, pretty beautiful green leaves. The next video is going to have the different parts of the process of photosynthesis.